Hello everyone. On May 28th, 2009, while Feng Hong was having dinner with his girlfriend at a restaurant, he received a call from his mother. The conversation was not particularly significant, just a simple inquiry about his life. However, the conversation was suddenly interrupted. He tried calling back, but no one answered. Assuming that his mother was busy and considering that he was having dinner with his girlfriend, he thought it would be inconvenient to have a long phone conversation. Therefore, after returning home, he called his mother again, but there was no signal. He thought maybe his mother had turned off her phone and gone to sleep because his parents had divorced, and he was living with his father while his mother lived alone in another province. So he didn't know who to ask about the situation and became very worried. After 3 days of being unable to contact his mother, Feng Hong decided to call the Hongta District Police in the city of Yuxi, where his mother lived, to report the incident. The police began investigating this woman and discovered that her name was Zhou Min, 39 years old but still young and beautiful. Her ex-husband Pham Tai, 50 years old, revealed that when their son tried to contact Zhou Min without success, he called her workplace to inquire about her situation. However, a colleague informed him that Zhou Min had not been to work for several days and had not requested any leave, even though she was a very diligent and responsible person. Friends and relatives searched everywhere but found no results, so they had to report to the police. The police focused on the close relationships of the victim and checked their bank accounts because in serious missing person cases or cases that give the feeling someone has died, there are usually two reasons: love and money. A close colleague of Zhou Min revealed that just one day before she went missing, Min had complained to her about her boyfriend whom she had been dating for the past 2 years. His name was Song Nian, 32 years old, 7 years younger than Zhou Min, but very tall and handsome. When checking Zhou Min's call history, they discovered that the two had made 2 phone calls to each other at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. on the day she went missing, with the last call being to her son Feng Hong. In general, Zhou Min's life was healthy and there were no complicated relationships. Her close friend reported to the police that the man she was in a romantic relationship with, who came from Sichuan to Yunnan for business, was the person Song Nian. However, he was someone who ate a lot but worked little and frequently borrowed money from Zhou Min without ever paying it back. Each time he borrowed a few thousand renminbi, but after several times the accumulated amount reached tens of thousands of renminbi. Zhou Min had confided to her friend that she wanted to end this relationship, but she was being threatened by him. Over a year ago, Zhou Min had used her savings to buy a villa of over 400 square meters in the suburbs. Now she wanted to sell it, because the real estate price had risen and she estimated that she would make a large sum of money. However, because Song Nian knew about her plan to sell the villa, he tried to borrow 500,000 yuan to go into business with a large investor. Because Nian had known Min for over 2 years, Min knew that there were no large investors here, only European bookmakers, meaning online gambling. Of course, Min never wanted her hard-earned money to fall into Nian's hands, the person she wanted to leave. That's why she avoided him and ignored his calls several times. The police summoned Song Nian to the station for questioning. He admitted to having a romantic relationship with Zhou Min and owing her some money. However, he claimed that on the day Min went missing, he called her twice to meet and reconcile, but she refused, citing work as a reason. When the police mentioned his previous threats to Min when she wanted to end the relationship, Song Nian said that he had strong feelings for her and didn't want to break up. He claimed that his threats were only meant to keep her with him and not to harm her. The police investigated Song Nian's activities from the evening of May 28th to May 29th and discovered that he was being pursued by loan sharks. He called Zhou Min multiple times to reconcile and borrow money, but was always turned down. Unable to find a way to repay his debts from May 28th to May 30th, he accepted an offer to go on a tour with an older, wealthy woman to earn money to pay off his debts. The police invited this woman to cooperate in the investigation, and she confirmed Song Nian's alibi. Checking the cameras at tourist spots, the police found that Song Nian appeared in the footage, ruling him out as a suspect. Upon receiving the news of Zhou Min's disappearance, the police notified the banks where she had accounts to check recent transactions, especially after the evening of May 28th. However, no transactions were recorded since her disappearance. The police checked the cameras near Zhou Min's residence, but due to the limited number of street cameras in 2009, there weren't as many as there are now. Her private house was located in the city, while the villa she invested in was in the outskirts of Yuxi City. The villa was newly built and was still unfinished and unpainted. The police decided to check the cameras in both the residential area and near Zhou Min's villa. Finally, they discovered a silver Toyota car with Zhou Min's registered license plate appearing in the surveillance video at 10:30 a.m. on May 29th. The Toyota car was heading towards the city center of Yuxi. Upon zooming in and closely examining the footage, the police noticed that the driver was not Zhou Min, but a man. The front passenger seat was empty and the image on the surveillance camera was not clear enough to identify the features of this unfamiliar man or determine if Zhou Min was in the car. Many questions arose, such as who was the man driving the car? What was his relationship with Zhou Min, and was he involved in her disappearance? However, due to the blurry image of Zhou Min's car moving towards the city center and disappearing after a few turns, this lead gradually hit a dead end. The police decided to focus on investigating Zhou Min's financial situation. The banks where she had accounts reported to the police about 2 consecutive cash withdrawals from her card in Kunming on May 30th. The police, along with bank technicians, immediately checked the surveillance videos from the ATM and found that the person withdrawing the money was not Zhou Min, but an unfamiliar man. The first withdrawal occurred at 5:59 p.m. when it was raining in Kunming, and there were many people bustling around with umbrellas. The security camera captured an image of a tall man holding a dark yellow umbrella appearing on the right corner of the screen. He appeared to be around 25 years old, wearing a black t-shirt and trousers. When he reached the ATM, he folded the umbrella and placed it at his feet. The man was wearing a dark plastic sun visor hat with a wide brim, which was quite common in China. Wearing the sun visor hat was clearly an attempt to conceal his identity from the ATM camera. However, the camera angle was not from above but rather from below, so his hat didn't provide much coverage, and his face was still quite clearly captured. In the surveillance footage, the man appeared anxious and nervous, constantly glancing around while withdrawing the money. After obtaining the cash, he put it into a light blue plastic bag and quickly left. The police immediately printed these images and sent them to Zhou Min's friends and family members for identification, but no one recognized the man in the pictures. The second withdrawal occurred approximately 8 hours after the first one at 2:23 a.m. on June 2nd. This time, the man appeared less cautious and anxious compared to the previous withdrawal. He walked straight to the ATM without wearing a hat or a face mask, dressed in a red shirt and black jeans. He calmly withdrew the money while casually smoking a cigarette. Comparing the images from the ATM camera in both instances confirmed that this man was the same person who made the previous withdrawal. It had been over a day since Zhou Min's family reported her disappearance, and her son hurriedly took a flight to Yuxi, Yunnan, to assist in the investigation and accompanied the police to check Zhou Min's private house and villa. There were no signs of disturbance at her private house, with all belongings intact, and no signs of theft or forced entry. The police then unlocked the gate to the villa and proceeded with the investigation. The villa was newly completed, but still in its unfinished state. During the investigation on the ground floor of the villa, on the concrete floor, there were numerous shoe prints mixed with mud, indicating that someone had been there on a rainy day. Besides the women's shoe prints with pointed heels matching Zhou Min's shoe size, there were also other male shoe prints. However, these male shoe prints were not from the same pair of shoes, but from 2 different styles and sizes, all of which were still very new and distinct. The police followed the shoe prints on the staircase and checked the second floor of the villa, where they unexpectedly found the lifeless body of Zhou Min lying in the corner of the bathroom. The body was pale and showed signs of decomposition, with patches of green-brown and purplish-brown discoloration on the skin. These marks were particularly dark in the pelvic bone area, abdomen, chest, face, and spotted on the extremities with bruised blood flowing under the skin around the neck. Based on these findings, the forensic examiner determined that the victim had been dead for nearly 4 days and the cause of death was strangulation. After discovering the body of the missing person, Zhou Min, the case turned into a homicide investigation. At this point, the bank continued to report that Zhou Min's ATM card had been used to withdraw money 31 times at various locations, such as Kunming and Sichuan, totaling over 63,000 yuan. The police divided into multiple teams and arranged surveillance near these ATM machines and the surrounding areas of the withdrawal points, but the unidentified man did not return. They made an observation that he never withdrew money from the same ATM twice. The investigators carefully examined the phone numbers that had contacted Zhou Min on the day she went missing. After ruling out the phone number of her boyfriend, who had evidence of being unrelated to the crime, and her son, the remaining phone numbers that called were all inquiries about house viewings. The police thoroughly reviewed each phone number and requested the telecommunications company to provide the call, history, and messages of all the numbers in contact with the victim around the time she was killed. Quickly, a phone number with the prefix 151 caught the attention of the police. The owner of this subscription number had called all the other phone numbers advertising sales in the same newspaper, including Zhou Min. In other words, on a page where people posted advertisements for selling houses, villas, transferring workshops and selling motorcycles, bicycles, and cars. His phone number with the prefix 151 had called and made appointments to visit for transactions. This was illogical because at the same time a person could not have so many shopping needs to buy everything in the world. The police proceeded to meet each person who had placed an advertisement in the newspaper on that day. A man named Mr. Liu, who was selling a car, stated that on the afternoon of May 28th, a man called him expressing interest in buying his used car. They agreed to meet near a supermarket, but that evening, the buyer canceled the appointment claiming an unexpected urgent matter that prevented him from arranging the time. At 4 p.m. on the same day, Miss Yang, who had advertised a house for sale, also received a call from the same man arranging to meet to see the house. When she and her husband arrived at the designated location, they waited for the buyer, but he never showed up. When they called the buyer back, he said that the price of the house was too high, so he had decided not to view it. The police questioned all the individuals who had placed advertisements for selling houses, workshops, bicycles, and motorcycles in the same newspaper and received similar information about appointments being made and canceled. The witnesses all described the man who made the phone calls as having a clear and somewhat Beijing accent. After further investigation, the police discovered that the number 151 had also called the emergency hotline 114 on the same day. They quickly contacted the hotline to search for information and were provided with a recording of the call made from this subscription number. In the recording, they heard the voice of the suspect in a conversation with a female operator as he was asking for the address of Zhou Min's villa. Thus, it was highly likely that this person was not a local resident as he did not know the location of Zhou Min's villa in the suburbs. He may have made the phone call to inquire and ask for directions because he was unfamiliar with the area where the villa was located. After listening to the recording repeatedly and carefully studying it, they discovered that although the person spoke in a Beijing accent during the call, he used certain words characteristic of the local dialect in Yunnan province. Based on the analysis, they believed that the caller could very well be someone from the Dali area in Yunnan province. Despite his intention to conceal his local accent, his word choices inadvertently revealed this fact. Basically, the temporary police determined in the evening of May 28th that the suspect had made a phone call and arranged to meet Zhou Min while also calling the hotline 114 to look up the address of the villa. The man murdered her that evening, and on the morning of May 29th, around 10 a.m., he drove Zhou Min's Toyota car, appearing on the road leading to the city center of Yushi. In the following days, the suspect withdrew money from Zhou Min's account at both locations Kunming and Sichuan. Gradually, the picture of the case became clearer, and the police identified the direction of the investigation. The suspect took advantage of buying a house to approach Zhou Min and rob her property, demonstrating a high possibility of him committing further crimes. After the successful first crime, it was highly likely that he would approach and kill people with the intention of robbing their assets, similar to the case of Zhou Min. The police's urgent task now was to arrest the suspect to ensure the safety of society. After analyzing the situation, the police speculated that the person, using the SIM card with the number prefix 151, was highly likely to have returned and gone into hiding in Dali. In the evening of June 5th, 2009, the Hongta police quickly arrived at Dali and coordinated with the local police to conduct a large-scale search. Along with that, they collected all the train ticket data from Dali to Yushi in recent times for review. Because it was mandatory to use an identification card when purchasing train tickets, the investigators narrowed down the search to males aged 20 to 30. Then a person named Song Quen came into the police's focus because the photo in Song Quen's archive profile completely matched the person who withdrew money from Zhou Min's account. Song Quen is 28 years old this year and lives in Gudong District, Heilongjiang Province. Although he is not from Dali, Yunnan Province, as initially speculated, he had come to Dali 5 years ago to run a tea shop. During the time of the crime, he had just left Dali and traveled to Yushi by train on May 26th. The police informed all hotels, guest houses, and budget accommodations in the Dali area and surrounding districts about the suspect's information. Around 9 p.m. on June 6th, a receptionist at a guest house in the Dali area called the police to report a case where a guest registered with the name Song Quen. The physical characteristics and information matched exactly with the person the investigators were looking for. Immediately, the police planned to apprehend the suspect. At 1 a.m. on June 6th, a female receptionist led the police to the room rented by Song Quen and knocked on the door. When the door opened, the police immediately rushed in and subdued him on the spot. The police interrogated Song Quen that same night, and he quickly confessed and revealed another accomplice also in Dali. This accomplice's name was Liang Fei Huen, 37 years old, from Hanshan, Heilongjiang province. The police quickly found traces of Liang Fei Huen and arrested him at an internet cafe. Based on the ATM withdrawal videos obtained by the police, along with 3 bank cards belonging to the victim found during the search of the suspect's room at the guest house, these 2 individuals confessed to the crime and recounted the process of the murder. On a night in mid-May 2009, when Quen was having dinner at a restaurant in the area, he happened to meet Huen. Both of them had a similar regional accent, a blend of Dali and Heilongjiang, so they recognized each other as fellow countrymen and greeted each other. Song Quen and Liang Fei Huen moved to sit at the same table and had a few drinks together. Because they coincidentally met fellow countrymen in a foreign place, they quickly became friendly and cheerful. At this moment, Liang Fei Huen appeared very serious and asked Song Quen if he wanted to earn a lot of money. Song Quen seemed skeptical, but immediately replied that everyone wants to earn a lot of money. Huen leaned close to Quen and told him that he had stolen from many places before picking pockets on buses and trains, and had been sentenced to 3 years in prison for theft. While in prison, he learned how to steal without being detected and how to cover his tracks. He was confident that he could commit the crime without being caught, but what he lacked was an accomplice to support him in carrying out this plan. Immediately, Quen nodded in agreement. At the end of May, Quen and Huen arranged to meet at the train station to prepare for their robbery. At this point, they had a robbery plan, but they didn't know where they would commit the crime. After examining the train ticket prices, they found that the cheapest fare was to the city of Yuxi, so they decided to choose Yuxi as the location for their criminal act. Upon arriving in Yuxi on the afternoon of May 27th, they bought a newspaper to search for targets. Song Quen and Liang Fei Huen believed that people selling assets like houses, cars, and motorcycles must have money, and they would have easy reasons to approach them privately. They believed that they could make money by robbing these people, so they called each person, and their chosen target was Zhou Min. They explained that before choosing Zhou Min, they had made a phone call to arrange a meeting with a man selling a car with the intention of robbing him. They planned to pretend to request a test drive and take the man to a secluded spot to rob him. However, when they arrived at the meeting point, they saw that he was accompanied by several other people, making it difficult for them to act, so they replied that they were busy and didn't have time to meet. Next, they arranged a meeting with a woman to view a house. This time, learning from their unsuccessful previous attempt, they immediately asked her if she was accompanied by anyone. The woman replied that she was accompanied by her husband, so these 2 individuals didn't go to the meeting point and continued to search for another target. They made a phone call and arranged to meet Zhou Min to buy a villa around 6 p.m. that evening. At this time, it was raining heavily and getting dark, so Zhou Min replied that it was raining too much and it was late, inviting them to come and view the house the next day. Liang Fei Huen told Zhou Min that when viewing a house, buyers tend to choose bad weather conditions, rain and wind, to see if the house leaks or gets flooded during heavy rain. If they came in good weather, they wouldn't notice any inconveniences with the house. It sounded reasonable, so Zhou Min didn't suspect anything and drove to the suburban villa as planned. Knowing that Zhou Min was alone when she arrived at the meeting point, Quen and Huen carefully observed the surroundings of the villa. They noticed that this suburban area mostly consisted of partially constructed villas with few people around and was relatively empty. When it got dark, they determined that this would be the best target and timing to commit the crime. Once inside the villa, they pretended to inquire about the price and went upstairs to inspect. Zhou Min went upstairs with them to continue the discussion, but little did she know that they would restrain and search her, taking 3,000 yuan and 3 bank cards. They threatened Zhou Min to reveal the passwords of the cards. After obtaining the passwords, Huen urged Quen to strangle Zhou Min to death. After killing the victim, the 2 of them cleaned up the crime scene to erase fingerprints, following the instructions given by social gang leaders to Liang Fei Huen when he was in prison. They stayed on the first floor of the villa and didn't leave until the next morning around 10 a.m., taking the victim's car. They then abandoned the car in a deserted area and traveled to places like Kunming, Sichuan, spending a portion of the stolen money. Afterward, they decided to return to Dali to hide because they believed that imitating the Beijing accent when contacting the victim and calling the emergency hotline 114 would surely mislead the police. However, they did not know that their use of some local words in Dali had led the police to follow the clues and cordon off the area. When arrested and interrogated, Song Quen cried a lot, made sincere confessions, and showed remorse. He continuously sobbed, apologizing to the victim's relatives and talking about his family in Heilongjiang who were waiting for his return. However, this belated remorse could not help Quen reduce his sentence. In the end, both Song Quen and Liang Fei Huen were convicted and sentenced to death in October 2009 for the charges of murder and robbery. The most impressive aspect of this case is the story of a cunning and manipulative individual combined with a somewhat intellectually impaired person committing robbery and murder. The way the cunning individual manipulated the psyche and actions of the intellectually impaired person was truly evil. Everything they said, the intellectually impaired person believed without question, but they also put on an impressive retaliation. The innocent act of showing their face on the ATM camera left behind all the loopholes and quickly led both perpetrators to justice. The most heartbreaking aspect of this case is the tragic death of Jo Min. She had almost no one to rely on and lived alone. The fortunate victims of these two murderers narrowly escaped because they had someone accompanying them when they arrived at the meeting point. Jo Min, lonely and vulnerable as she was, did not take any precautions when leading two men to view a house in a deserted suburban area late at night. This cost her dearly, even her life. In our lives, we all face difficulties at times, don't we? Sometimes we wonder why our lives aren't flourishing like others. Why is it that while we are trying to find a job, other people already have stable incomes? Sometimes we feel lonely and wonder why others always have companions, someone to support them and walk hand in hand in happiness while we don't. Have you ever thought that it might just be the superficial part of our lives? We truly don't know what is happening around us and what difficulties the people around us have faced in their lives. At around 4 p.m. on May 4th, 2014, in the city of Duzhou, Shandong Province, a young man living in a city thousands of kilometers away made a phone call to report that he had suddenly lost contact with his parents who were living in Duzhou, and he wanted the police to come and check if there was any problem. Both of his parents were over 50 years old and retired. Moreover, his father was in a wheelchair and couldn't move easily, so it was unlikely that his parents had gone far. Since yesterday afternoon, he had made several phone calls to their home, but no one answered. Upon receiving the notification, a group of police officers went to the address provided by the young man. The couple lived in apartment 1403 of a new housing complex located in the suburbs of the city. When the police arrived at the house, the door was locked and there was a bad sign right at the doorstep, a small bloodstain. The police quickly called a locksmith team for assistance, and when the door was opened, a strong smell of blood filled the air inside. The living room in the house became chaotic, with the constant opening and closing of doors, and there were small bloodstains on the windows. There was a long bloodstain on the floor, indicating signs of dragging. All the drawers, large and small, were opened and showed signs of search and rummaging, clearly indicating that these actions were aimed at finding valuables. The trail of blood on the living room floor led to the balcony on the southern side where a severely injured body with multiple bloodstains was dragged. This blood trail only led to the balcony near the flower pot on the windowsill, which had been shattered. There was a naked woman lying slanted against the wall with her face leaning towards it, and next to her was a dry bath towel. The woman's bath towel was soaked in blood and thrown aside. This is the owner of the house, Yu Yuan, 57 years old, who is the mother of the person who made the phone call. The body of the woman had multiple wounds caused by sharp objects, and the man's wheelchair was still in the living room, along with the wheel, which had many bloodstains. This indicates that the man in the wheelchair had also been injured. The man's name is Liu Fa, 58 years old, who had previously suffered serious injuries in an industrial accident, and this wheelchair was his means of transportation. But where is the man now? The police speculated that he might have been controlled and taken away by the perpetrator because there were bloodstains outside the door. Continuing to search the two bedrooms, the police found that the situation was even worse than the living room. The closet doors and drawers were all opened, and clothes, documents, and miscellaneous items were scattered everywhere. The room became chaotic with no place remaining tidy, but what the police were most concerned about was the bed in the west bedroom. There was blood splattered on the bed and the mattress was pushed towards the wardrobe, indicating clear signs of struggle or wrestling. Near the bedroom door, there were multiple small bloodstains and blood footprints on the floor, forming a trail from the bed to the wardrobe, about 80 centimeters apart, but it had been covered with clothes and miscellaneous items thrown on top. When the police moved them to examine, they unexpectedly discovered the dead body of a man lying face down on the ground parallel to the bed. Both occupants of this house had been killed. The police began to conduct a detailed investigation at the crime scene to determine the motives and reasons behind the suspect's actions. However, the chaotic and disarrayed room made it difficult to determine the starting point of the tragedy. The table in the living room remained intact and tidy, with an open bottle of strong liquor on it, containing only about 300 ml of alcohol. The bottle had a unique shape resembling a gourd, but what was unusual was the absence of drinking glasses on the table, indicating that neither the victim nor the perpetrator had shared a drink together. Furthermore, there were clear bloodstains on the liquor bottle. In the west bedroom, the police found a box of the same brand as the liquor bottle in the living room. This box was typically used to hold 2 bottles, but there was only 1 bottle left inside. Based on this, the police concluded that this bottle belonged to the victim and had been consumed by the suspect after committing the crime, as there were bloodstains on the bottle. If it had been consumed before the incident, there would not have been any blood fingerprints on it. Based on the fact that the remaining liquor bottle was less than 300 milliliters, it indicated that the perpetrator had consumed nearly a liter of alcohol after the killings, suggesting that his mental state at the time was likely out of control and frenzied. The madness of the murderer was not only manifested through the horrifying chaos at the crime scene, but also through deliberate destructive actions. After the crime, he disconnected the gas pipeline and cut off the gas supply, indicating that the perpetrator wanted to create a gas explosion to destroy the crime scene or commit suicide. However, in the end, he abandoned that idea, opened a window, and fled. On May 4th, the blood-soaked murder case shook the previously peaceful area. 2 people were killed, including a disabled person. The police paid particular attention to the bloodstains on the floor and near the door. Based on the area and location of these bloodstains, they deduced that the suspect may have been seriously injured during the struggle with the victim. Although the room was in a chaotic state, the windows and entrances remained intact without any signs of forced entry. So how did the perpetrator gain access to the crime scene? It is possible that the suspect was acquainted with the victim and was invited into the house. After confirmation from the victim's autopsy, it was determined that the male victim died from 14 stab wounds, primarily on the face, neck, chest, and abdomen. Although the female victim showed signs of destruction, there were no indications of sexual assault. Near the body, there was a bath towel and a shower head in the bathroom with the water still running. The police temporarily reconstructed the crime scenario, suggesting that the perpetrator and the male victim were sitting and talking in the living room, followed by a conflict, and the attacker assaulting the man in a wheelchair. At that moment, the wife heard the cries for help from the bathroom and rushed to assist, but was attacked and stabbed by the perpetrator. The male victim attempted to flee when he fell off the wheelchair, but was dragged back into the bedroom by the assailant. After attacking and killing both victims, he rummaged through the wardrobe to search for money and valuable items, while also throwing clothing and documents onto the body of the man on the ground. After finishing the search in the bedroom, he returned to the living room to continue searching. The behavior of the suspect was very peculiar, because after committing the crime, he drank alcohol and attempted to ignite a gas explosion before opening a window and escaping. It is unclear why the perpetrator was allowed into the house by the victims, and his method of killing was exceptionally brutal, yet he searched for belongings, like in a contradictory robbery case. The clues have been sent for DNA analysis and evidence search, while an investigation into the social relationship of the victim couple is also underway. Mr. Liu F.A. and Mrs. Yu Yuan have retired from a boiler manufacturing plant for many years, and their social relationship is very normal, with rarely any conflicts with anyone. However, nearly 2 months ago, they called the police on the evening of March 6th to report that someone had violently banged on their door, causing them both to be very frightened and unwilling to open the door. When the police asked the couple about the reason or suspected who might have caused this incident, initially both of them hesitated and didn't want to say, but eventually Mr. F.A. mentioned that it could be an old friend of his named Wang Qiang. They stated that Wang Qiang worked in waste material procurement and had a close relationship with the boiler manufacturing plant. Mr. F.A. and Mrs. Yuan got to know Wang Qiang at this factory. However, they didn't mention any conflicts with Qiang, they only appeared apprehensive and worried. When the police continued to question them, they said they were also unsure if the person was actually Wang Qiang and didn't want to request the police to search for or take any action against Qiang. So why didn't Mr. and Mrs. Liu F.A. want to talk about Wang Qiang? And does Qiang have any connection to the murder of these 2 victims? At this moment, the police had obtained DNA test results and retained fingerprints at the crime scene. Comparing them with the national database, they discovered that the DNA traces found at the crime scene belonged to Wang Qiang, and there were numerous blood fingerprints of his at the crime scene. When the police checked the surveillance cameras in the area, they found that around 2 p.m. on May 3rd, a man carrying a black crossbody bag appeared and entered the area where the victim's apartment was located. This person was a highly suspicious individual, but the surveillance camera's viewpoint was limited. In the first angle of view, the perpetrator quickly passed by, and took a few steps to a large tree that obscured him. In the second angle of view, almost his entire body was hidden by a car parked in front of the A area, and only his back could be seen. In both angles, the police couldn't clearly see the man's face. The police requested the victim's relatives to identify, and they firmly affirmed that this person was indeed Wang Qiang. However, it was strange that after reviewing the surveillance video multiple times, the police only saw his image when he entered the area but didn't see him leaving the neighborhood. While all entrances and exits of the neighborhood were monitored, how Wang Qiang left the area remained a mystery. At that time, the security guard reported that in the afternoon of May 3rd, a black car was parked in the neighborhood. This car caused traffic obstruction, so the security guard went to check who it belonged to. They determined that the car didn't belong to any residents in the neighborhood, but they couldn't contact the owner. The police shifted their focus from searching for the person to searching for the car. They quickly found this black car through the license plate and determined that it belonged to Wang Qiang. The car entered the neighborhood in the afternoon of May 3rd from around 3:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. The police tracked the car's journey based on the traffic surveillance system outside the neighborhood, but after passing through 2 intersections, the car completely disappeared. Due to the lack of surveillance cameras at this point, tracing the car's whereabouts became difficult. After that, the police proceeded to investigate the relationships of Wang Qiang's relatives. The first person under investigation was his son, who stated that on May 3rd his father came to visit him and gave him 10,000 yuan, telling him to live well and not to worry about him anymore. Wang Qiang also mentioned that he would leave the car near an industrial area on the outskirts of Duzhou City, and he could retrieve the car later. Qiang's son appeared very concerned about what his father said, but his father didn't provide any further explanation and hastily drove away. On the 4th of May, the police found the black car in an industrial area on the outskirts of Duzhou City. In the passenger seat of the car, the police found a black crossbody bag. Upon comparing the crossbody bag, it closely resembled the bag worn by the suspicious man captured on the surveillance camera. The police discovered blood traces on the steering wheel and driver's side door. They collected the blood samples and conducted DNA tests, which revealed that all the blood traces belonged to Wang Qiang. This indicated that Wang Qiang had abandoned the car there and continued to flee. Although Qiang's son didn't know where his father was going, he sensed something peculiar in his father's behavior. He mentioned that prior to leaving, Qiang sat in the car and made a phone call to his younger brother. The police went to search for Qiang's younger brother, Wang Tai, but discovered that he was also missing. The police continued to check the cameras in the area to track T's activities since he left home. Through surveillance footage on the last road, the police determined that Qiang met Tai on the evening of the 3rd of May in Ningqi district. The two of them hired a black taxi and left Duzhou City. Based on information from toll stations on the highway, the police quickly identified the license plate of the black taxi and located the driver. The driver revealed that he noticed one of the passengers in the car had an injured hand, and during their conversation he overheard them talking about going to the Ningqi District Hospital for bandaging. Subsequently, the driver dropped both individuals off at the gate of Ningqi District Hospital. The police continued to inspect the security cameras at the hospital and discovered that at 1:30 a.m. on the 4th of May, Qiang and Tai appeared at the north gate of the hospital. However, after lingering in the area in front of the hospital for a while, they didn't enter and continued to leave. The police collected surveillance images along the road and were surprised to find that in the subsequent footage, Qiang and T went in different directions. When T left, Qiang stood anxiously in one corner and paced back and forth. That moment was around 4:30 a.m. after Wang T had left. Before disappearing again, there were no recorded images of Qiang after he walked a distance. Wang T called a taxi and returned to Duzhou City alone. The reason why T returned to Duzhou and Qiang vanished from the surveillance images remains unclear. The police launched a comprehensive investigation between Duzhou and Ningqi on the 4th of May, and they found Wang Tai in Duzhou district. It was only then that the reason for the two brothers' escape from Duzhou to Ningqi on the night of the 3rd of May became clear. Wang Ti tearfully explained to the police that his older brother was injured in a brawl and wanted to find a place for treatment and rest. Tai believed that his brother had gotten into a serious fight with someone and wanted to leave the area for a while also seeking medical attention for his injuries. Therefore, he suggested going to Ningqi, and the two brothers hired a taxi to go to Ningqi District Hospital. However, upon arrival, Qiang revealed the truth to his younger brother. Wang Ti recounted that his brother worked as a scrap metal collector and had many connections with steel factories. The Liu Fa couple, who were acquainted with Wang Qiang, met him at a boiler manufacturing plant. At that time, Fa was working as a manager at the boiler manufacturing plant. Qiang often buys some scrap steel from the factory to sell to Fa at a low price. They have collaborated many times, and later Fa mentioned that There was a large batch worth nearly 100,000 yuan, but could be sold to Wang Qiang for a slightly lower price of 60,000 yuan. However, a deposit of 30,000 yuan had to be paid first. Due to their previous successful collaborations and no issues, Qiang trusted Fa and gave him 30,000 yuan. Shortly after, Fa had a serious accident at the workshop and retired early. Qiang was worried that his business would come to a halt and repeatedly urged Fa to return the money, but Fa always assured him that everything would be fine and asked Qiang to wait. However, this situation dragged on for several years. During this extended period, Qiang faced many difficulties in his business. His wife left, taking their daughter, and his grandchild suffered from a congenital disease because they didn't have enough money for a treatment. Under these pressures, Qiang lost control and argued with Fa and his wife multiple times over the money issue. Mr. Fa had already undergone leg surgery the previous year and was also experiencing financial difficulties with medication. Mr. Fa was also ill and could only borrow 10,000 yuan to take his wife for medical treatment. If Qiang wanted to take this amount, Mr. Fa could only repay Qiang 10,000 yuan and ask for further leniency. Qiang believed that Fa and his wife had the money but didn't want to repay, so after a heated argument he became furious and killed both victims. He then searched the entire house, but found that Fa only had 10,000 yuan in the safe and a few hundred yuan in other drawers. At this point, Qiang felt desperate and remorseful, considering committing suicide by igniting a gas cylinder in the room. However, he remembered his son's family, including his 1-year-old grandchild who needed money for medical treatment. Therefore, he went and gave the last 10,000 yuan to his son before leaving. After hearing the truth, Wang Ti was extremely shocked and looked at his deeply wounded older brother. With a conflicted and worried state of mind, Qiang decided that Wang Ti should return to Duzhou to avoid being implicated. After much hesitation, the two brothers embraced each other one last time and said their goodbyes. Afterward, Wang Qiang disappeared and no one knew where he went. After analyzing and evaluating the case in more detail and gathering information from the locals describing a stranger appearing in the area, the police continued to trace Wang Qiang and search for him. They sent hundreds of search notices to police stations in the area and issued a wanted order to find Wang Qiang. However, after an intensive search for half a month, no significant leads were discovered. Around 4 p.m. on June 9, 2014, residents of a village in Nanxi District, Hebei Province, went to the rice fields near the village and discovered a body in the well used to supply water to the fields. It was an old well with a stone mouth over 15 meters deep. The well opening was only about 60 centimeters wide, making it challenging to retrieve the body from the bottom. The police constructed a tripod with iron poles, and after over an hour of continuous effort, they managed to retrieve a male body. According to the forensic report, this man was approximately 45 years old and in good health, with no significant injuries on his body except for minor burns from rubbing against the well walls during the fall. On the victim's left hand, there were a bunch of keys, a pack of cigarettes, 200 yuan, and a wristwatch. There were no other documents to identify the victim. The body was retrieved with the head facing downward and the legs upward. Based on this information, the police concluded that the victim had committed suicide by plunging his head into the well. The news of this death caused shock throughout the entire village. The urgent task at hand is to determine the identity of the victim, and the police quickly collected samples and sent them to the provincial police headquarters for DNA testing. However, due to severe decomposition of the body, the comparison results will take some time. Meanwhile, the police in Nanxi District have hired a professional team to continue the search at the bottom of the well, using local expertise in retrieval, hoping to find useful clues to identify the victim. After 3 hours of searching, the retrieval team did not find any results. The divers were exhausted after spending a long time in the water, as the well was over 15 meters deep. Based on their experience, they believed that if they continued digging deeper, they would only retrieve mud from the bottom of the well. However, the police in Duzhou City remained determined to continue dredging the well for further search. After 4 hours of searching, they found a men's t-shirt and a pair of different fabric shoes. These items were believed to have slipped off when the victim struggled while submerged headfirst in the water. What caught everyone's attention the most was a necklace made of braided cord, with a white stone encased in a thin gold leaf pendant. Subsequent DNA testing revealed that the victim was a perfect match with the suspect Wang Qiang. The police in Nanxi District, Hebei Province, informed the police in Duzhou City, and Wang Qiang's relatives confirmed that those items belonged to him. Thus, the perpetrator of the case had committed suicide, perhaps due to exhaustion from the constant tension and evading. According to the forensic report, There was nothing in Wang Chang's stomach, and he only had 200 yuan on him. This indicates that the suspect had reached a dead end and decided to end his own life. The Duzhou police considered this a very special and dramatic case, as money had cost 3 lives in a painful and tragic manner. In this incident, it was essentially a murder case between a debtor and a lender. Indeed, Liu Fa had owed Wang Chang for quite some time, but he had no intention of evading the debt. The reality was that he didn't have enough money and only had 10,000 yuan left to pay for his wife's medical treatment. However, Wang Chang was also facing many difficulties in life. His wife had left him and his granddaughter had a congenital illness that needed treatment. Moreover, his job was not going well. All these pressures piled up on him at once. Perhaps he thought that both Liu Fa and his wife had salaries but didn't want to pay the money. But the reality was that Liu Fa's situation wasn't any better. After the accident, Liu Fa and his wife also fell ill and needed treatment. Their circumstances were also very difficult. Each person has their own life, and we don't know what they are going through, so let's not rush to judgment in this case. It is truly regrettable that all 3 people lost their lives due to the hardships of life. Wang Chang regretted his actions during his escape because the money he had killed for was not for his own use, but to treat his granddaughter. Although he needed a lot of money during his escape, he did not bring a single penny from the money he obtained. It seems that from the moment he committed the murder, he had considered suicide. However, he stopped and left after igniting the gas cylinder and opening the window because of his tender and penniless grandchild who couldn't afford medical treatment. Wang Chang met and handed over the last sum of money to his son and then designated the place to abandon the car. Although he was a serious offender, a cold-blooded murderer, who had killed 2 victims when Wang Chang hugged his younger brother and watched him walk away, he paced back and forth with a restless and remorseful demeanor. Perhaps those moments were tormenting the murderer's mind even more. It serves as a life lesson about controlling emotions and rejecting violence. In life, have you ever felt a strong desire to possess things that others have? For example, when you see someone using the latest smartphone or driving a fancy scooter owned by your colleagues or friends, but when you finally get it, or someone gives it to you after a short period of time, you no longer feel as excited about it and consider its presence as something ordinary. Have you ever experienced this psychological phenomenon? It's a common human trait, although the degree varies from person to person. Now let's listen to today's story related to this issue. On May 27, 2016, on the Nianjiang River in Jizhou City, Heilongjiang Province, a man was swimming in this stretch of the river. As he approached the shore, he accidentally touched an object underwater. It was a partially floating, brown cloth bag. Being an avid angler, he immediately thought of it as a bag used by someone for carrying fish that slipped away and drifted here. With that thought in mind, he grabbed one end of the bag and tried to pull it in, but it was heavier than he expected. At this point, he sensed something unusual and quickly let go of the bag, climbed ashore, and called the people around to examine the strange object in the river. By this time, the bag had been pushed close to the shore by the river's waves, and its shape indeed resembled that of a fully grown person, causing swimmers in the area to immediately become suspicious and call the police. This was a fairly wide stretch of the river with a convenient traffic bridge nearby on the right side. The area had many large trees, and the grass was neatly trimmed, creating an ideal and refreshing space. People often brought cloth tents here for camping because the water was quite clean and suitable for swimming. When the police arrived and retrieved the brown cloth bag from the water, they opened it and were shocked to find the badly decomposed body of a male. Witnesses then revealed that a few days earlier when they were swimming here, they had occasionally touched and felt a strange, soft object underwater, but they only thought it was some discarded item. Some curious individuals had even tried to reach out with their hands and feet to search for it, but they couldn't find it again, so no one paid much attention. It wasn't until the bag floated up and was pushed close to the shore that people discovered it was a corpse. After investigating, the police discovered a large 32-kilogram stone tied tightly to the victim's back, resembling a person wearing a backpack. The purpose of the stone was to weigh the body down and sink it to the riverbed. This stone had the same color, size, and shape as the stones on a nearby embankment. After basic geological examination, it was determined that the stone had been taken from the riverbank itself and used to tie it to the victim. At first glance, it could be inferred that this was not a typical drowning case, but a murder in which the body was thrown into the river. The victim was a tall and sturdy man, approximately 1.75 meters tall and weighing 65 kilograms, aged between 47 and 54. The body was wrapped in a brown cloth bag, but what was strange was that the victim's pants had been pulled down to thigh level and the belt had been untied. If it weren't for the cloth bag covering it, one could hypothesize that the pants slipped down as the body floated in the water. However, it was clear that the body was still wrapped in the brown cloth bag, so it's highly likely that the perpetrator did this. But why would the perpetrator pull the victim's pants down to thigh level? This situation could be easily understood for women, but the victim was a middle-aged man, so the likelihood is low. The victim was wearing brown sneakers with white soles. Their head had numerous large wounds, including a crushed skull with shattered fragments embedded in the brain tissue. The face was unrecognizable due to extensive decomposition from prolonged exposure to water. The forensic doctor initially concluded that the victim had been killed approximately 3 weeks ago, and the cause of death was traumatic brain injury resulting from repeated blunt force trauma to the head. In addition to the victim's pants being pulled down to the thigh, the pockets were turned inside out. It was highly unusual for someone's pants to be turned inside out in such a manner, indicating that the perpetrator had searched the body for something. After examining the body, the police found no evidence or belongings on the man that could establish his identity. Currently, the top priority for the police is to determine the victim's identity. Firstly, the police searched the database of recently missing persons with similar height, weight, and age characteristics as the victim. Eventually, they found a match for the victim's characteristics in the vicinity of the Nianjiang River. The individual was named Yu Guifu, 53 years old, a self-employed laborer. His wife had passed away several years ago, and his children were all grown up and working elsewhere. Yu Guifu's circumstances were difficult as he lived with his 8-year-old granddaughter named Xiao Yu. It was known that he went missing on the evening of May 6th, which was 21 days ago. In addition to the physical resemblances, his disappearance coincided with the approximate time of death of the victim. The police immediately contacted Yu Guifu's family to conduct DNA tests which confirmed a blood relationship. They were able to establish that the victim was indeed Yu Guifu. Fu earned a living as a 3-wheeled cargo driver, taking on odd jobs as they came. His social relationships were not complex, and he had no debts. He was described as gentle and not involved in any significant conflicts. His daily routine involved working to support his granddaughter without competing or conflicting with anyone. The preliminary investigation indicated that he did not have any known enemies or major disputes. On the afternoon of his disappearance, Fu called his younger brother Yu Kuizhong. Over the phone, he informed his brother that he had been hired to transport goods at night for a high price and asked Zhong to come to his house and take care of his 8-year-old granddaughter. Fu didn't provide specific details about whom he was transporting goods for or the destination. Following his brother's instructions, Zhong arrived at Fu's house around 10 p.m. and stayed there for the next 2 days to look after Xiao Yu. The next day, when Fu didn't return, Zhong tried to contact him several times but couldn't reach him. Given the information that the victim had been hired for nighttime cargo transportation on the night he went missing, the police suspected that the person who hired Fu was highly likely to be the prime suspect in the murder, as conflicts might have arisen during the job. The police immediately contacted the telecommunications service provider to check the call history and discovered that the last individuals Fu had contacted on the day of his disappearance included his working daughter in Sichuan, a neighbor, his younger brother, Yu Kuizhong, and 3 other people. However, these individuals were gradually eliminated as suspects due to evidence of unrelated crimes, and none of them had hired Fu for cargo transportation. Initially, the police suspected that the victim may have lied to his younger brother on the night of his disappearance, asking him to babysit because he had to leave the house in the evening for some reason that he didn't disclose, or the person he hired had met him directly on the way without arranging it over the phone. However, now that Mr. Fook is deceased, and there are no leads to identify the person who hired him because they didn't communicate over the phone, and there were no witnesses, the police are puzzled. At this point, since Mr. Pook's tricycle has disappeared, the police decide to focus on gathering information about the vehicle to solve the case. The Jizhou District Police have explored the area around Mr. Pook's residence and the river area where the victim's body was found, searching for nearly 4 days but still haven't found Mr. Pook's tricycle. Now the police begin to doubt the statement of Mr. Zhong regarding the victim being hired on the night of his disappearance and put the victim's younger brother on the list of suspects. A man reported to the police that on the night of May 6th, he saw Mr. Pook standing in front of a house with Mr. Zhong, and the 2 brothers were talking to each other. However, he was standing at a considerable distance, so he couldn't hear their conversation. Yu Kuizhong, on the other hand, stated that he only went to his brother's house after receiving a call asking him to babysit for Mr. Fook and did not meet his brother at the house. The witness confirmed that he was standing in a building opposite the victim's house and saw Mr. Fook pulling a red-painted cart, but when he reversed the cart, it slid into a water channel and he struggled to lift it up. At that time, Mr. Zhong was standing nearby but didn't help his brother. After struggling for a while, Mr. Puk pulled the cart and left. The conflicting testimonies of Mr. Zhong have left the police confused because there are no surveillance cameras, so they don't know who is telling the truth. Little Xiaoyu went to bed early at 9 p.m., so when asked, she didn't know if her grandfather returned that night or not. At this moment, the victim's son reported to the police that upon hearing the news of his father's disappearance, while he was working in Beijing, he hurriedly returned to Jizhou. Surprisingly, his stepbrother, Mr. Zhong, suggested that the two nephews go to the Nianjiang River to search, and the exact location they searched was where Mr. Puk's body was discovered. Is it just a coincidence, or does Yu Kuizhong know something about this case? The police interrogated him about the incident, but Mr. Zhong showed no signs of worry and remained calm. Mr. Zhong explained that his older brother often brought little Xiaoyu here to play when he had free time, so when he learned that his older brother had gone missing, he immediately thought of going to the river to search. Mr. Zhong himself had been to that area a few times with his older brother, so he was very familiar with the Nianjiang River area. At this point, the police learned another piece of information, that Mr. Zhong has unstable nerves. His medical records show that he had a minor stroke and had to undergo training in acupuncture for a long time before he could return to normal life. Currently, the results of brain scans still show the presence of blood clots. Mr. Zhong has a problem with memory disorder, meaning he confuses the timeline of events in the past and has many erased memories. Therefore, it is possible that Mr. Zhong misremembered meeting his older brother and didn't intentionally provide misleading information to the investigators. This is truly a challenging case for the police because they cannot exclude Yu Kuizhong from the list of suspects, but they also lack evidence to accuse him. All the information the police have gathered so far is vague, without any concrete evidence or specific circumstances, and they cannot rule out any possibilities. Mr. Fu Shem didn't carry any valuable belongings when he went out except for an old mobile phone that his son bought for him as a gift, and a tricycle worth a few thousand dong. Would someone kill him just for these low-value items? However, if it's not about the possessions, why were his phone and tricycle taken away? While the case was gradually reaching a deadlock, another witness reported to the police that a few weeks ago a man named Puk had a conflict with a fisherman named Zhu Shan, who was 30 years old and worked by setting nets and placing baskets in the area to catch a fish for sale. Tian, despite being young, had a hot temper. One day, Puk sat by the river to cool off and wash his hands and feet, unintentionally sitting very close to the area where Tian had set his nets. Tian had experienced multiple instances of stolen fish, so when he saw Puk fidgeting around with a suspicious-looking cart in close proximity, he thought Puk was the one who had been stealing his fish. Tian angrily cursed and berated Puk, and they exchanged a few heated words before Puk left. The police investigated Tian's whereabouts and activities on the day Puk went missing, but because it had been a while, Tian couldn't remember precisely, and there was no evidence of his involvement in any criminal activities. Furthermore, according to the police's analysis, experienced fishermen like Tian had a good understanding of the area, based on the rock found attached to the victim's body, indicating that the body had been disposed of near the Nianjiang River. The police concluded that the crime scene was likely close to this riverbank. Additionally, considering the low water level, it was unlikely that the body would drift far away when thrown into the river. Instead, it would likely remain in the vicinity for several days until it decomposed and resurfaced. If the perpetrator was a fisherman from this area, they would be familiar with the water levels and the river's terrain. It wouldn't make sense for them to choose such an exposed location to dispose of the body, risking discovery and identification. Moreover, both Tian and most fishermen in the area owned boats, making it relatively easy to transport a body to a distant location and discreetly to dispose of it. Therefore, based on logic, Tian didn't appear very suspicious, although he hadn't been completely ruled out as a suspect. The police decided to focus their investigation on the area where the victim's body was discovered, as there was a high likelihood that the victim had been killed near this location. After multiple investigations, despite not obtaining any information about the murder case, the police obtained another suspicious lead. Several groups of swimming enthusiasts in the area reported a series of thefts at their makeshift campsites. These groups set up temporary tents using bamboo, wood, plywood, and canvas as an outdoor camping area for changing clothes after swimming. These individuals reported that all their food, canned goods, and belongings stored in the tents had gone missing. Although these weren't valuable items, when the police asked if they could pinpoint the exact day of the thefts, they were unsure. They only remembered that the last time they visited the river was a few weeks ago, and upon returning they discovered that all the food had been stolen, and even the belongings inside the tents had been overturned and broken. Considering the nature of the incidents, the police deduced that the disposal of the body must have occurred during the nighttime. During the day, many people came to swim in the area, and there was a relatively large bridge nearby, making it impossible for the perpetrator to dispose of the body during daylight hours. The thief who stole miscellaneous items from the campsites would also have to act at night, as they even smashed the belongings inside the tents. The time frame of the thefts coincided with the victim's death, and the victim's phone was also taken by the perpetrator. Based on these coincidences, the police hypothesized whether the thief and the murderer were the same person. However, the identity of this individual remained completely elusive, as they wore gloves during the search and theft, indicating experience in evading investigation and the possibility of having a criminal record. The lack of surveillance devices on both sides of the river, coupled with the elapsed time since the incidents occurred, posed challenges for the police in their search and investigation. The police have collected data from surveillance videos around the Nianjiang River area. After much examination and search efforts, they finally found that at around 4:48 a.m. on May 7th, a man dressed in camouflage clothes appeared on the surveillance screen, walking from the direction of the Nianjiang River towards the city center. He was wearing a backpack and carrying a grayish-blue cloth bag on his back. The police showed the surveillance video to the people who had set up camp by the river, and some of them recognized that the bag and backpack belonged to them. It was clear that this man was the one who had stolen items from the tents. According to multiple surveillance cameras on the street, the police observed that the man had been walking for over 2 hours and eventually disappeared when he turned into a residential area in Jianhua District. The police printed the man's picture from the camera and distributed it to each household in the area for identification, but no one knew the man's identity from the video. Everyone thought he was a stranger passing through the area. However, why was there no trace of him when he walked through this area? If he didn't enter the residential area and continued walking, the next cameras on the street would have captured his image. Could he have taken some form of public transportation? However, this residential area doesn't have a bus station, so it's possible that the thief took a taxi. Based on this reasoning, the police requested taxi companies in the area to check the GPS tracking system of each taxi driver who passed through the Jianhua residential area between approximately 7 o'clock and 8 a.m. that morning. Quickly, a local taxi company reported that one of their taxis had picked up a passenger in that area during that time frame. The police met with the taxi driver, and he confirmed that he had indeed transported the man in the picture. He was also impressed by the man's distinctive clothing and the amount of luggage he carried. The driver mentioned that he dropped off the passenger at building number 58 in a residential complex in Tifeng District. The police immediately conducted a thorough investigation of the residence in building No. 58, but they found no suspicious leads, and no one recognized the man from the camera. They continued to expand the investigation to neighboring areas, and finally arrived at an internet cafe nearby, where a female staff member recognized the photo of the mysterious man. She said that the man was not only a regular customer at the cafe, but was also present there at the moment using the internet service. Truly, this situation was a stroke of exceptional luck. The police slowly approached the suspect, who was sitting and observing. The man seemed deeply engrossed in playing a game, and on the table there was a white iPhone that closely resembled the one owned by Mr. Fu, which his son had bought for him. Subsequently, the police immediately arranged for officers to surround and subdue the suspect on the spot. The man's name was Wang Wenjiang, 43 years old, and he earned a living as a freelance laborer in Zhizhou. The police checked his mobile phone and discovered that it didn't have a SIM card. Wang Wenjiang stubbornly claimed that he hadn't had time to insert a SIM card because he had just bought the phone. However, when the police showed him the image of him carrying the bag and backpack from the tent camp on the camera, he confessed to the theft but adamantly denied the accusation of murder. After many difficulties, the police finally found the suspicious man, but the problem now was to prove that this phone belonged to the victim. Otherwise, they could only charge him with theft. The police asked Wang Wenjiang to enter the password for the phone, and when he entered the password, the phone was successfully unlocked. Then the police checked the contents of the phone and found everything empty, but the investigators found some games on the device. Little Xiao Yu and the victim's son were brought in to examine the evidence. When they saw the game software on the phone, the little girl immediately recognized these familiar games installed by her grandfather, and the two of them had played games together many times. When they opened the game, the login information for the little girl was still saved there, proving that this mobile phone definitely belonged to Mr. Yu Guifu. At this point, Wang Wenjiang had no more excuses. Wang Wenjiang himself had a previous criminal record of theft and had only been out of prison for over a year. Wang Wenjiang confessed that on the night of the incident, he entered the campsite to commit theft. After finishing his work, he took a backpack filled with food and miscellaneous items and also carried another bag in his hand. While he was planning to leave, he saw a fire blazing in the distance at night. Out of curiosity, he walked towards the fire to check and discovered Mr. Fu sitting alone. By that time, Mr. Fu had finished transporting goods and was burning a pile of scrap wires to collect copper for extra income. When he saw the pile of burned copper next to Mr. Fu, Wang Wenjiang immediately felt greed and malice. He slowly approached, but Mr. Fu noticed him. Wang Wenjiang intended to attack discreetly but failed and resorted to robbery. The two struggled on the riverbank for a while. Due to Mr. Fu being much older than Wang Wenjiang, he was physically weaker, and within a few minutes of struggling, Mr. Fu was hit repeatedly on the head with a wooden stick grabbed by Wang Wenjiang, causing him to fall down. When Mr. Fu lay motionless, Wang Wenjiang approached, checked, and discovered that the victim was dead. Wang Wenjiang then searched the victim's body, but only found a white mobile phone. He pulled down the victim's outer pants to search the underwear, hoping to find a wallet, but all he got was a few yuan, which was the payment Mr. Fu had just received for transporting goods. Then he took out a large piece of cloth from the backpack, wrapped the victim's body, and tied it together with a large stone on the riverbank before throwing Mr. Fu's body into the river. Returning to the crime scene, he saw the tricycle and the victim's burned copper wires, but he only took the mobile phone and a few yuan from the victim. He threw the tricycle and the pile of copper wires into the river. He added that because he was carrying too much stolen food, he became tired after walking halfway to the residential area in Tifeng district and couldn't continue, so he had to take a taxi home. The police, based on his statement, went to the location near the river where he had disposed of the tricycle and the copper wires to retrieve the evidence. In November 2016, the People's Court of China sentenced Wang Wenjiang to the death penalty for the crimes he committed. Today's case reflects the psychology of those who are never satisfied, which is also a part of human psychology when they desire what others possess. For example, when you like a new car, you will start to see it more on the streets. Does that mean that everyone has bought more cars? No. It's just because you are paying more attention to it, so you focus on noticing it, and the perceived frequency of its appearance will be higher. For example, a colleague is holding the phone you dream of. At this moment, the question in your mind might be how they could afford it when their income is similar to yours, right? In reality, people only see the surface of others' happiness and possessions without thinking or caring about their difficulties. Honestly speaking, we have no idea how others obtain those things, but sometimes we have to accept the fact that we can achieve what we want, but we can't have everything we desire. To acquire that phone, your colleague probably had to save, while we might spend money on fancy meals, movies, or trips. They gave up the exciting experiences we had in order to have that luxurious phone. But if we were to own those items, would they truly bring us lasting joy? Perhaps for a few days or weeks, and then we would start to see them as normal and taken for granted. Once we have what we desired, we quickly feel bored and may even lose our enthusiasm. This is the psychology of craving what others have. If we have a good and noble mindset, we will strive to achieve it. However, if we have a twisted and malicious mindset, it can be very dangerous, as seen in the story above. How do you feel about today's case? Leave a comment so we can discuss. And if you liked it, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.